Part 71. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 705. The superweapons of the Mind Empire have huge destructive power and wide influence. They are a disaster that the coalition and allied forces have to guard against. However, the limitations of this superweapon are not small. It takes a long time to prepare for release. Naturally, we must pursue maximum damage and impact. When releasing, of course, we must try to select areas with the highest density of coalition and allied forces. Freed. The original opinions put forward by Wang Ling and the subsequent preventive measures taken by the coalition and allied forces were implemented based on this condition. Crack generators were set up everywhere to block the view of the electronic map of the Soul Empire so that they could not see the coalition and allied forces. Naturally, they had no way of knowing their troop deployment. They did not know which place had the highest troop density. It was easy to know super weapons will be used. Spreading the troops is just in case, and the impact and damage of the Soul Empire's super weapons can be minimized if they really fall. For example, what General Li Wiki and Agent Tanya are doing now is to disperse the troops as much as possible and confuse the Mind Empire. The dark areas of several crack generators are connected. They can quietly transfer troops and reduce the density. They can quickly provide support in the event of a war. And if a super weapon is actually dropped, only this part will be affected. After it is controlled, the other parts will be affected. Troops in the area can also quickly surround and annihilate them. Wang Ling couldn't do such complicated methods and precautions during the game. He didn't have time, and it was difficult to control. However, the Red Alert world is very convenient to command and deploy. In order to deal with the super weapons of the Mind Empire, these are quite necessary. Of course, after all, this transfer and construction are no small projects. When the construction of all crack generators is completed, the major troops have initially completed the corresponding transfer, and before they start to rebuild again, the gene mutation of the Soul Empire has already completed the countdown. It is in the stage of preparation for release. Observing this, whether it was Wang Ling, General Li Wiki, Agent Tanya, or other officers and soldiers, they felt a little nervous, fearing that this gene mutation would directly cover their heads, and the entire base was a little scared. A feeling of. However, when the countdown was over, this gene mutation was still refused to be released, which made all the officers and soldiers still unable to calm down and were on alert every moment. Wang Ling stayed near the command post and stayed with several confidants. He was also a little confused about this situation. In his spare time, he also observed the situation in other war zones from the electronic map, and only then did he know the reason. It turns out that it is not just the two bases in their war zone that are on guard against danger. After all, the countdown to the super weapon of the Mind Empire can also be viewed by officers and soldiers in other war zones, and they are all afraid that this thing will fall on their heads. The bases in the theater have all taken corresponding preventive measures. The simplest base among them is also covered by two crack generators, blocking all its troops. Few troops are active outside. When Yuri's troops attacked, only a small part of the army was exposed, which obviously did not satisfy the Mind Empire's desire for control. All these targets were covered up and hidden under the dark area. The Soul Empire could not see the troop deployment for a while, and could not make up its mind. Naturally, it had no intention of releasing super weapons. In this way, no war zone is directly attacked by super weapons, and it is generally considered safe. But it is precisely because this gene mutation is always being watched with eager eyes, which also makes all war zones a little nervous and uneasy. After all, this is a sharp blade hanging over the head that may fall at any time. Under such tension, more than a day passed. During this period, not only was the gene mutation of the Mind Empire not released, but the psychic storm was also prepared and was in a state to be released. As a result, the major war zones have become a bit more nervous. Not to mention taking the initiative to send troops to attack Yuri's base. Even if Yuri's troops invade, they will be a bit frightened and dare not send too many troops to stop them. Mainly relying on various defensive buildings. After several battles, the losses in all aspects were considerable. The impact of the super weapon can also be seen from this aspect. Not to mention that it was successfully released. Even before it was released, it had already caused panic and weakened the combat effectiveness in disguise. Of course, if you just blindly guard against it, it is not a solution after all. You can guard against it for a while, but you cannot guard against it forever. Under this kind of tension, almost another day passed. In the second half of the night, the Seoul Empire took advantage of an attack to explore the dark area of a coalition base, and then directly dropped the super weapon genetic mutation. However, this base obviously took precautions in advance. Under the genetic mutation, only about 100 soldiers were genetically mutated into wild orcs, wreaking havoc within the scope of the corresponding crack generator. The coalition base that was attacked quickly dispatched 5 SEALs and more than 10 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. With its powerful lethality against infantry, they quickly wiped out nearly 100 wild orcs. The rest of Yuri's troops were also killed. Armed helicopters and various tanks worked together to eliminate them. On the other hand, in an allied base in a war zone, it seemed that the Mind Empire suddenly used its mind detection ability to forcibly explore a dark area, and then immediately dropped the psychic storm, causing widespread damage and controlling a group of allied troops lived there. However, the allied forces in this area, whether they are buildings or troops, are only part of a base. After the psychic storm, the remaining guards no longer have any scruples, and the entire army was dispatched in an instant, using powerful force. Firepower forcibly eliminated this group of controlled troops. As a result, the super weapons of this round of the Mind Empire, Gene Mutation and Psychic Storm, have finally been used, and the countdown to the next round has begun. These two super weapons indeed caused widespread damage to the attacked bases of the coalition forces and the allied forces, causing heavy losses. However, fortunately among the misfortunes, the two bases did not damage the fundamentals in this battle. They targeted the soul. The Empire's super weapon prevention plan finally had its intended effect. The next round of super weapons will take a long time to be ready for use. During this period, all war zones are considered safe for the time being, and all the officers and soldiers are finally relieved for the time being. This time, the two super weapons of the Mind Empire attacked bases in 2 theaters respectively, but the Eastern Plains theater was not included. Judging from the previous concentrated release of super weapons and the large-scale relocation of bases, the Mind Empire at that time seemed to have the intention to classify the Eastern Plains war zone as a key war zone and use it as a springboard for the war after occupation. But now, Wang Ling's intrusion has disrupted this plan. Now even the super weapons have been dispersed and released. It is obvious that the Mind Empire has gradually given up on this war zone. The next focus of the attack may even be on them. I don't even have a clear goal. I was yelled at before I even woke up, and I drove to the city. I didn't get home until 5 in the afternoon, and I didn't have time to do anything. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 706. The arrival of the era of super weapons can be said to have changed the pattern of war to a great extent, making all battlefields more cruel and dangerous. In conventional battles, one has to be distracted to guard against super weapons. When he was in the game, Wang Ling had very little exposure to the super weapon mode. After all, it was too difficult. If he didn't pay attention, or if his development was slower, he would risk being directly destroyed by the super weapon. In today's Red Alert world, although I don't want to accept it, I have finally entered this era. Fortunately, the coalition forces and the allied forces joined forces early to learn from each other's strengths and offset their weaknesses. 2 against 1, even in the era of super weapons, it is still very advantageous. After all parties have complete super weapons, the Empire of the Soul will be suppressed to a certain extent. Anyway, this round of the Soul Empire's super weapons has finally passed. With this threat gone, all the officers and soldiers in the major bases breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, this is only temporary. The next round of super weapon delivery will arrive in more than a week. The current prevention plan will continue, and during this period, all battlefields must resume development as soon as possible. Even seize the opportunity to attack. Leaving aside other war zones, here in the Eastern Plains, Agent Tanya didn't seem to want to wait for the Allied super weapon Lightning Storm to be ready. She started making light prism tanks overnight. It seemed that she was preparing for a ferocious offensive. The coalition forces are much calmer. In fact, they are also waiting for the advent of the coalition super weapons. The wait did not last long. In the morning of that day, several consecutive alarms were heard from the electronic map. The coalition super weapon was finally officially launched. Just like the Alliance super weapons, the Alliance super weapons also have two categories. One type is mainly for strong attack and destruction, and the other is the strongest auxiliary type. The super weapon built this time is a strong attack type of the former, a nuclear bomb silo. That's right, the Psychic Empire's super weapons are mainly psychic weapons and genetic weapons, the Allies' super weapons are mainly meteorological weapons and time and space teleportation. For the coalition forces, they are mainly nuclear weapons and defense devices. This nuclear bomb silo is also built at the headquarters of the coalition forces and the headquarters of his own army. Captains and team leaders and above have the right to view the detailed electronic map. Taking advantage of this convenience, Wang Ling also hurriedly checked from the electronic map. Got a handful. This nuclear bomb launch silo has a well in its name, but it is actually a very large building protruding from the ground. The overall shape is conical. When the nuclear bomb is ready, the covers on both sides of the silo will split, revealing the super large nuclear bomb inside. Within the visible range of the electronic map, you can select any target and conduct a large-scale bombing without distinction. Although he disliked super weapons, this nuclear bomb silo was his own super weapon after all. After Wang Ling saw it on the electronic map, he was filled with joy. After looking at it for a long time, he turned back the electronic map with unfulfilled interest. At this time, the super weapon countdown time for nuclear bomb attack was also marked in the corner of the electronic map. It was the same as the total time of the Allied lightning storm, which was a little more than a week. Although other personnel did not have the authority to view the electronic map of the headquarters in detail, they could see the countdown to the nuclear bomb attack and knew that their unit's super weapon was completed. For a moment, they felt refreshed and confident. If the Apocalypse tanks and Kirov airships are the biggest killers of the coalition forces, then this super weapon is the most important weapon of the entire coalition camp and the biggest killer weapon. There is no comparison with the former. Tisk tisk, the coalition super weapons have also come out. This situation is getting more and more interesting. As for the Allied base command post, Agent Tanya smiled a little playfully after seeing the countdown to nuclear bomb attack. However, after all, it was something belonging to the coalition, so she didn't care much about it. On the one hand, she urged the tank factory to speed up the construction of the Prism tank, and on the other hand, she made temporary deployments. The coalition did not take any action, but the Allies did. Frequently. Under such expedited production, in the evening, the tank factory finally produced 10 light Prism tanks. After this powerful weapon was in place, Agent Tanya successively selected a group of Allied soldiers, plus 2 SEALs, 20 rocket pilots, 5 Phantom tanks, 10 Grizzly tanks, and 10 a multifunctional infantry vehicle, and finally 10 heavily armed soldiers specially riding in infantry vehicles, were temporarily combined to form an offensive force. The person who led the team was Agent Tanya herself. This girl directly asked Wang Ling to take care of the base, then left the base and led the attack team to attack Yuri base number 1 that night. As a commander, he actually led the team to attack in person. Such a saucy operation made even Wang Ling stunned. Doesn't this seem like a competition with what I have? If Li Tong and Gu Suanwu heard such words, they wouldn't know how to look at him. In fact, this kind of behavior is in line with Agent Tanya's temperament and style. She was originally the war goddess of the Allied forces. She was good at fighting, not management. She took over the position of commander in a daze and kept her busy for so long. Seeing that Wang Ling was so leisurely, she had already complained in comparison. It's rare to take the initiative to launch an attack. Of course, the commander's position can be thrown away as much as possible. Let's have a good fight first. This allied attack team is not slow in general. Only the heavily armored soldiers are the most insignificant, but they are all transported on multifunctional infantry vehicles. Without this burden, the remaining troops can move much faster. Following the speed of the Allied soldiers and prism tanks, the Allied attack team lasted several hours and finally reached the outskirts of Yuri base number 1 in the middle of the night. The Yuri base had already observed the approach of this group of Allied troops from the electronic map. It deployed heavy troops at the entrance and exit, piled up many tanks and vehicles, and was ready for a big battle. Of course, although Agent Tanya can be very aggressive at times, she is very shrewd when it comes to fighting, and even often does not lose to Wang Ling. During this attack, she did not choose to attack by force. Instead, she assigned different tasks to different units of the team based on Wang Ling's style of play. The prism tank is responsible for the main attack and attracting the attention of the enemy, especially virus snipers. Once discovered, it must be dealt with immediately. Rocket pilots, heavily armored soldiers and multifunctional infantry vehicles are responsible for air defense and specialize in fighting laser UFOs that may attack. Phantom tanks are used against tanks, especially getter tanks. The remaining Yuri troops are all left to Tanya's agents to deal with, especially the mind-controlled vehicles and magneto-electric tanks. As for the Allied soldiers and grizzly tanks, they are responsible for cleaning up those fish that have slipped through the net, attracting enemy firepower, and providing fire support. The division of labor order was issued, and maintaining this formation, the Allied offensive team finally encountered Yuri's base. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 707. There are no mind control vehicles, magneto-electric tanks, or laser UFOs in the outer defense force of Yuri base, but there are 2 virus snipers. As a result, the Allied troops were in place, and after the division of labor order was issued, 10 light prism tanks stepped forward directly, focusing fire on the 2 virus snipers from a distance, killing them instantly, and the light prism rays even directed towards them unscrupulously. The surrounding lines were connected, covering a large number of soldiers and tanks at once. And with this fight, the light prism tanks were like poking a hornet's nest. The guards at Yuri's base were so anxious that they took the initiative and rushed towards the Allied attack team, especially the light prism tanks. Among them were Yuri. New recruits, wild orcs, psychic troops, as well as getter tanks and tornado tanks are all very common units in Yuri's base. However, after causing this group of trouble, the light prism tank hid behind Agent Tanya's order and ran away after the fight. Agent Tanya pushed forward with the phantom tank, followed by a group of Allied soldiers and grizzly tanks. After the getter tank at the front approached, several phantom tanks directly focused their fire, killing one of them with 3 or 2 shots, and quickly eliminated it. Then came the infantry army, mixed with many tornado tanks and individual get tanks. Bang 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 bang. At this time, it was Agent Tanya's turn to fire. Her guns kept shaking, and each bullet could kill an enemy infantry. She quickly cleared a clearing, exposing several tornado tanks, and then she hid close, almost a bomb was dropped, and several tanks exploded in response. Ta-da-da ta-da-da. Boom boom boom. Behind, the Allied troops and Grizzly tanks also opened fire, diverting the attention of Yuri's troops so that Tanya's agents could quickly kill all the enemy troops. Under this combination, the counter-attacking Yuri troops had little resistance and were divided and annihilated by the Allied offensive team. Of course, Agent Tanya is the one who contributes the most. In this version, Agent Tanya's newly learned tank exploding skills are simply used to the extreme. The first batch of Yuri troops were wiped out, but the remaining Yuri guards were still huddled inside the base. In this regard, Agent Tanya was not in a hurry, and sent out light prism tanks. Several light prisms were rayed down, killing all the defensive buildings at the entrance and exit of Yuri's base, and then the army gradually approached. Forced to this point, the 8 laser UFOs hovering over Yuri base finally couldn't bear it anymore. After receiving the order, they rushed towards the Allied forces collectively. After observing the direction of the laser UFO, Agent Tanya quickly retreated back with the ground troops, leaving behind rocket pilots, heavily armed soldiers and multi-purpose infantry vehicles. Although the individual defense and control efficiency of these 3 types of air defense forces is not as good as that of the coalition forces, the combined firepower is also very powerful. They had a head-to-head fight with the 8 laser UFOs and defeated them at a very small cost. Wiped them all out. Subsequently, the Allied offensive forces continued to advance forward. The long-range attack of the Prism Ray was also very difficult for the Yuri base. Hiding outside the base, they bombed many of its defensive buildings one after another, even some of the main buildings were mixed in. Finally, as 2 rays of light blasted into the remaining guards, the guards finally could no longer sit still and launched a large-scale counterattack, even more numerous than the previous wave. Even mind-controlled vehicles and magneto-electric tanks he also followed in. Agent Tanya's operation can be said to be a test of her commanding ability. Of course, the coordination of the troops is also very important. Although we have tried to avoid the loss of troops, during the battle, there will inevitably be things that cannot be taken into account. Swish swish swish. For example, this time, Yuri's troops counterattacked. 3 magneto-electric tanks absorbed 2 prism tanks and a Grizzly tank from a very long distance. They gradually took off and flew towards the interior of Yuri's base. Hateful. Seeing this scene, Agent Tanya was a little anxious, but she did not panic. She temporarily ordered the remaining prism tanks to kill several virus snipers in this group of troops, and then along with the other Grizzly tanks, they made an emergency retreat and hid in the outside the attack range of the magneto-electric tank. During this period, 2 prism tanks were blown up in the air one after another. The remaining Grizzly tank also landed with residual health and was instantly controlled by the mind control vehicle. However, the Allied offensive forces could still afford this kind of loss, and the ensuing battle would be the same as before, except that the opponents were more numerous. With the help of camouflage, the Phantom tank was not discovered by the Magneto tank for a while. It hid in the team and only bombarded the Getter tank. The other Allied soldiers opened fire to attract the attention of Yuri's troops, while Agent Tanya was responsible for harvesting the heads and detonating them by the way. Tank. Under her harvest, large swaths of Yuri's troops fell, and tanks exploded one after another. Even the magneto-electric tanks and mind-controlled vehicles were no exception, and they could not escape the attacks of Tanya's agents. The war ended quickly. With the explosion of the last mind control vehicle, the counterattack of Yuri's guards officially failed. After this battle, there were not many guards left in Yuri base number 1. Agent Tanya simply ordered the light tanks to attack unscrupulously. While other troops were defending, they would also selectively attack some bases. Buildings, the entire Allied offensive team swept through like a strong wind in the next period of time, ravaging the entire Yuri base, pushing all the way, and finally blasting all the buildings in the entire base. Even those hiding aside several slave mines were also killed by the concentrated fire of the Grizzly tanks. Yuri Base Number 1 was officially declared destroyed. Pretty. Sir Tanya is mighty. Oh. 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 Dot. The battle was won, and all the soldiers who participated in the battle cheered excitedly. This battle is of great significance to the Allies. Looking at all battlefields, this is the first time that the Allies have fought alone to overthrow a Yuri base. In this battle, it can be said that Agent Tanya played a decisive role in it. Being regarded as a hero-level unit, its combat effectiveness is certainly not an exaggeration. Even Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh after seeing it in the electronic video. In the past, Agent Tanya was not on the battlefield during training, and the Allies were suppressed everywhere. Now they can finally fight back. Although you are not used to it, but this battle was fought quite smoothly and shrewdly. Letting a hero-level unit of yours serve as the commander is a sign of humiliation, hee. Of course, it's more of a gloat than a sigh. As for the outcome of this battle, Wang Ling didn't care too much. After all, they were used to attacking cities and territories. They had seen this kind of scene too many times and had long been used to it. But this was the first time for the Allied forces. They cheered for a long time at the former site of Yuri Base Number 1 before gradually calming down and retreating in an orderly manner under the orders of Agent Tanya. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 708. To kill Yuri Base Number 1, because of Agent Tanya's unique attack method and cunning command and deployment, the entire attacking team actually did not suffer too many losses. Now that they have the remaining strength, they can still choose to attack the number 2 Yuri base. But fighting all night is too tiring after all, and it is better to go back and rest first. The most important thing is that the Allied superweapon Lightning Storm only has a few days left to prepare. Agent Tanya has received the news. When the time comes, the Lightning Storm will be released at the designated location by Agent Tanya. With this convenience, there is no need to use it in vain, and now there is no need to attack overnight. After returning from victory, the Allied offensive team was a little excited. There were cheers from time to time that night, and few of the officers and soldiers involved in the battle fell asleep. Seeing them like this, Wang Ling just smiled casually, ignored them, turned around, and fell asleep. But Sun Dehua was lying on the bed and curled his lips. You have never seen the world, isn't it just to kill a Yuri base? Look how excited they are, you can hear the cheers in our military camp. Erlu also echoed. A group of country bumpkins were pushed to the ground and beaten, but they finally hit back with a punch, and they started to scream. Hee, that's right, isn't it just to kill a Yuri base? What's so surprising, how many Yuri bases have been destroyed in our hands? Didn't Brother Donkey just say that it's just a bunch of country bumpkins? Let's just play the harp. It's none of our business. Let's go to sleep. To put it bluntly, this group of people still disliked the Allies. A group of people who were woken up complained and laughed at them, and they even had a sense of déjà vu as if their predecessors were looking at their juniors. However, in the middle of the night, the Allies were not sleepy, but they were. After laughing for a while, the group of people fell asleep again. Currently, there are 3 Yuri bases in the Eastern Plains war zone, while the coalition and allied forces only have 2 bases. Looking at this numerical comparison alone, Yuri base still has the advantage. But in fact, these 2 bases have hero-level units from the coalition forces and the allied forces respectively. They are fierce men who can be as powerful as 100. One person can have a devastating impact on the entire base and seriously damage the war. Force balance. Although the number is larger, in fact, because of the existence of agents Wang Ling and Tanya, the Yuri base in this war zone is now at a disadvantage, and it is an absolute disadvantage. Once Wang Ling or Agents Tanya, if they lead the team to attack again, they really have no confidence that they can hold on. For this reason, the three fearful Yuri bases spent the next few days desperately stationing troops and expanding their bases. It seemed that only in this way could they give them a certain sense of security. In the past few days, neither the coalition nor the Allied forces attacked Yuri base again. It was not until noon a few days later that the Allied superweapon Lightning Storm finally completed the preparation stage. At this moment, not to mention the excitement of the entire Allied forces, even a group of good-hearted officers and soldiers of the Allied forces were also curious. Soldiers from almost all war zones were staring at the electronic video, wanting to see the superweapon Lightning Storm with their own eyes. The power of. As early as a few days ago, when Lightning Storm was still in the preparation stage, General Bob had already handed over the positioning rights for the first release of super weapons to Agent Tanya. Now that Lightning Storm is completed, the specific bombardment wherever it goes, Agent Tanya naturally has the final say. In the past few days, Agent Tanya had already thought about the target of the bombardment. After the instruction to release the Lightning Storm was given, Agent Tanya without hesitation directed the coordinates to number 2 Yuri in the Eastern Plains base. In fact, if Agent Tanya leads a force attack, this base can also be conquered. However, this is the first time this Lightning Storm has been used on the battlefield. Even Agent Tanya has never seen it before, so of course he wants to. I wanted to observe it myself, so I chose this base. Of course, the Allied Forces headquarters did not skimp on this viewing opportunity. After the coordinates were determined, they were immediately disclosed to all officers and soldiers in all theaters, including the coalition forces. At that time, all electronic videos were concentrated in the Eastern Plains theater, over the number 2 coalition base. At this time, the Allied headquarters finally successfully launched the Lightning Storm. Rumble. Rumble. As the most important weapon of the Allied forces, this meteorological weapon is naturally powerful when activated. After the Lightning Storm is activated, the area around the number 2 base immediately falls into gloom, and is accompanied by the sound of lightning and thunder like a yellow bell. Within a moment, a large black thundercloud appeared in the sky. The black thundercloud formed, and the lightning that had been brewing for a long time finally found its outlet, and began to blast downwards without any hesitation. Click. 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 Large thunderclouds released multiple lightning bolts without any rules, hitting wherever they were. The entire Yuri base number 2 seemed to be facing the end of the world. An extremely thick bolt of lightning came wildly and blasted into the group of soldiers. An extremely large-scale lightning attack affected nearly 60 people in an instant and was chopped into ashes in an instant. 2 more bolts of lightning struck in succession, striking into the group of armored troops at Yuri base. In the blink of an eye, they exploded 5 Get tanks, 3 tornado tanks, 2 magneto tanks, and nearly 10 tornado tanks. The 3 mind control vehicles were chopped to half health. Click. 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 That's not all. Thunderclouds in the sky are still releasing lightning downwards. Not only the Yuri guards, but also major buildings were almost destroyed. Several lightning strikes struck down, and 4 mind control towers exploded in response. And even 3 getter cannons were chopped into half-blood. 3 biochemical reactors exploded, leaving several with residual health. The tank factory explodes. The army recycling station is half-healthy. The combat laboratory explodes. The soul detector has residual blood. Even the command post was hit by 3 consecutive lightning strikes, knocking out half of its health. Click. 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 There was another continuous bombardment, and this violent thundercloud seemed to flatten the entire Yuri base. Hundreds of infantry were killed one after another, and more than 30 tanks were killed or injured, and the entire Yuri base was completely destroyed. I was so frightened that I felt like I was facing the doomsday judgment. Of course, it is the product of a super weapon after all. The lightning storm has limited energy and cannot continue forever. After bombarding back and forth for more than 10 seconds, it finally stopped. The world-destroying thunderclouds in the sky gradually dispersed. Wisps of sunlight cast down, but for a while it was unable to dispel the gloom in the hearts of the remaining Yuri guards. Although more than 10 seconds does not sound long, in fact, in this more than 10 seconds, 20 or 30 super powerful lightnings fell, directly killing half of the guards of Yuri base number 2. Even the entire base's buildings were blown to pieces, with flames everywhere, seeming to tell the horror of super weapons. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 709. The super weapon lightning storm is over. The super destructive power seems to have silenced the whole world. Immersed in the super destructive power and visual impact of the lightning storm, I can't extricate myself for a while. It changes from extreme motion to it is extremely quiet, and the changes before and after are too abrupt. The remaining guards of Yuri base number 2 seem to have been stunned. They looked up at the entire base. The miserable appearance made them tremble from the bottom of their hearts. The Mind Empire has been using super weapons to deal with the coalition and allied forces before. Now their own base has finally tasted the bitter pill and is targeted by the super weapons of the coalition forces. And all the coalition forces and allied officers and soldiers who watched the scene also had dumbfounded expressions. The lightning storm was so terrifying. Yes, after all, it is the most important weapon of the allied forces. The power of lightning storm is naturally so powerful that it makes people tremble. It is worthy of being called a super weapon. This super weapon allows the Allied forces to control severe weather and trigger natural disasters through weather control devices, using the most destructive lightning as a weapon to bombard target bases. No matter how powerful manpower is, it can't compare to the destructive power of nature. Lightning storm is one of the representatives. In just a short time, a completed base was destroyed to pieces. Of course, on the one hand, it is also because Yuri's base has no precautions against this, and the large-scale troop garrison in advance also provides favorable conditions for lightning's superpower connection, but the power of this lightning storm is real. Is this a lightning storm? Too horrible. We finally have super weapons. We have been forced by the super weapons of the Mind Empire before, like a coward, and now it's finally their turn. Okay. This is the power, the bigger the better, let Yuri base also have a taste of this. Long after the lightning storm ended, the officers and soldiers in various theaters finally gradually recovered, and some exclamations and discussions were inevitable. Not to mention them, even Wang Ling had goosebumps all over his body at this time. Although he didn't come into contact with the super weapon mode many times during the game, he still saw the super weapon release scene many times. But it is a game after all. Feeling the power of this lightning storm in the world of Red Alert naturally has a different feeling, and your heart is filled with excitement. Agent Tanya was no exception. Staring at the current appearance of Yuri base number 2 in the electronic video, she even breathed a little heavier. However, she did not remain immersed in the excitement. She quickly came to her senses, quickly assembled the attack force, and personally led the team to the number 2 Yuri base. I will kill you while you are sick. The result of the attack can be imagined. Originally, Agent Tanya led the attack and was sure to conquer Yuri base number 2, let alone base number 2 just visited by lightning storm. Almost unable to form effective resistance, it was completely captured by this allied offensive team. At this point, only 2 Yuri bases, number 3 and number 4, remained in the Eastern Plains war zone. The original 4 bases were already in decline against the 2 bases of the Allied forces and the Allied forces. Now it's good that there are only 2 left. No matter how powerful they develop, they are no match for Wang Ling and Agent Tanya. This Eastern Plains war zone was about to fall, but now it is on the verge of peace. Of course, it is only on the edge. After all, number 3 and number 4 Yuri base has not yet been captured. Moreover, these two bases are developing rapidly in cooperation with each other, and it is somewhat difficult to attack them by force. Therefore, agents Wang Ling and Tanya were not in a hurry to attack them by force. So far, the Eastern Plains war zone has been peaceful for several days, but other war zones have become lively. The advent and successful release of super weapons have a specific effect not only on the direct destruction of those 10 seconds, but also on the encouragement of the entire army. The existence of super weapons is enough to counter the threat of the Seoul Empire, and it also gives all the officers and soldiers in all war zones enough confidence to launch strong attacks on Yuri's base in the past few days. Indeed, Yuri's base is very tightly defended and extremely difficult to break due to its unique mind control capabilities and the large number of Getter tanks and Getter cannons. But as the saying goes, a tiger cannot stand up to a pack of wolves. Under the joint attack of the coalition and allied forces, 2 Yuri bases in different theaters have been breached in the past few days. In the past few days, Yuri base seemed to be stimulated by the allied super weapons, and it was also quite crazy. Several bases often joined forces to attack a coalition or allied base in various theaters. For several days in a row, after a fierce attack, the allied base in the Binhai station area was successfully captured. Most of the other stations had no winner or loser, but when they attacked each other, they were very fierce. Wang Ling watched the battles in other theaters on electronic videos and was quite anxious. He once took the initiative to ask General Li Wiki for a fight and wanted to attack Yuri bases number 3 and number 4. However, General Li Wiki refused on the grounds that he was also waiting for news. What news are you waiting for? Positioning information of the super weapon nuclear bomb attack. In fact, in the past few days, because the countdown to the nuclear bomb attack has become shorter and shorter, various generals at the coalition headquarters have been discussing where the nuclear bomb should be dropped. The Allied forces faced this matter with ease and did not discuss it, leaving it directly to Agent Tanya. However, the Allied forces did not want to launch it casually. After all, every nuclear bomb was very precious. It would take more than a week to prepare for each launch. Fire the next one. During the discussion, many generals proposed launching the nuclear bomb into the Eastern Plains theater to assist Wang Ling in attacking Yuri bases number 3 and number 4. However, some generals pointed out that with Wang Ling's combat power, he could successfully conquer these two bases even without the help of a super weapon nuclear bomb attack, and there was no need to waste this nuclear bomb. For this reason, the generals even divided into two opinion factions, and they discussed and argued for a long time. It was not until the Allied forces base in the Binhai theater was wiped out that the senior officials in the Binhai theater finally made the decision to drop the nuclear bomb into the Eastern Plains theater. Why not the coastal theater? Because there are also 4 Yuri bases in the coastal theater. Even if one of the Yuri bases is bombed with a nuclear bomb attack, there is no guarantee that the coalition base in the theater will be able to destroy it. What's more, even if it is really destroyed, there are still 3 other Yuri bases watching. Although it can indeed relieve some of the pressure, in fact it will only treat the symptoms but not the root cause, and the situation will still be serious. It is said that good steel is used on the blade. If this nuclear bomb hits the number 3 and number 4 Yuri bases in the Eastern Plains, after some destruction, Wang Ling will be able to take advantage of the opportunity to kill these 2 bases and regain the entire Eastern Plains theater, freeing up strength to support the coastal theater. For this reason, after much consideration, these generals decided to give Wang Ling a favor. Of course, the nuclear bomb silo was built a little later after all. Before the nuclear bomb attack is ready, the coalition and allied forces will have to withstand the threat of the super weapon of the Mind Empire. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 710. This superweapon is, after all, a forbidden weapon, and its lethality is truly terrifying. If the Empire of Mind had not used it in advance, the Coalition and Allied forces would definitely not have used this powerful weapon. However, the Mind Empire has no such scruples at all. Their goal is to control all humans in the Red Alert world. After the plan is realized, everyone will be their puppets. Will they still be afraid of public opinion? As for super weapons, no matter which camp they belong to or what effect they have, they are very terrifying. Every time they are released, they can cause widespread panic and destruction. For example, this time the fastest genetic mutation of the Soul Empire's superweapon has not yet been completed, but with less than half a day left, all the war zones have already fully reduced their troops, shrinking all the troops back into the range of the crack generator, trying to avoid the genetic mutation that may come. While dodging, half a day passed quickly. The gene mutation preparation was completed and it was in a state to be released. However, looking at the major battlefields, there is no suitable base for release. The occasional ones exposed due to the attacks of Yuri's troops are far from enough for the Mind Empire to release super weapons. As a last resort, this gene mutation can only be shelved again and left to the side, watching with eager eyes. But before this thing was released, the troops in various war zones, especially the infantry teams, did not dare to act wantonly. They could only hide nervously in the base and rely on the crack generator to avoid disaster. Under such avoidance, even the psychic storm was ready. Under the double pressure, the officers and soldiers in each theater once again fell into a huge panic, not knowing when or where they would land. However, there have actually been speculations about the location of the release of the super weapon of the Mind Empire, the Allied Forces and Allied Forces headquarters, and it is probably the Allied Forces base in the coastal theater. After all, among all the war zones, the Allied bases were eliminated in the Binhai war zone. Only the Allied bases were left alone and unable to support themselves, and were the easiest to eliminate. For this reason, the Coalition headquarters also paid special attention to the Coalition commanders in the coastal theater and maintained tight defense. Sure enough, that night, all the officers and soldiers in the coastal theater Coalition base suddenly felt a buzzing sound. This was the activation of the Mind Empire's mind detection technology, which sensed the dark area under the crack generator and forcibly explored an area, exposing the Coalition guards deployed there. And this perception also symbolizes the arrival of disaster in this Coalition base. In this sensing area, the Mind Empire quickly selected an area with the highest density of soldiers, and forcibly dropped the super weapon gene mutation, which spread out a blue light wave in a large area. All infantry, one by one, were forcibly removed. After changing the genes, he mutated into a wild beast in an instant. Of course, after all planning in advance, the density of soldiers in the Coalition base has been reduced as much as possible, and the density here is only relatively high. But even so, the number is close to 100. Nearly 100 orcs suddenly appeared, and in an instant the alarm sounded throughout the base, and they started bombarding all surrounding Coalition troops and even buildings indiscriminately. The wild orcs bombarded buildings with average efficiency, but they were very powerful when attacking tanks and vehicles. The Coalition tanks deployed in this area bore the brunt and were blasted by all the wild orcs together, and then collectively demolished nearby buildings. During this period, sentry guns, battle bunkers, and magnetic storm coils were always counter-attacking, but there were too many of these wild orcs, and these defensive devices alone could not stop them for a while. But when the battle was getting fierce, more than 20 armed helicopters suddenly flew into the sky. Relying on the fact that these wild orcs had no air defense capabilities, they kept flying and started harvesting to their heart's content. Not long after, 3 more SEALs and 5 anti-aircraft crawlers arrived to assist in the attack. The originally dark orc army quickly shrunk in number under such an offensive, and most of it was killed not long after. But at this moment, with those anti-aircraft crawler vehicles as the center, a super strong impact storm suddenly appeared, spreading rapidly towards the surroundings, and a wide range of coalition buildings were either destroyed or blasted into half or even pieces. Blood and dust all over the ground suddenly rose up, forming a Yuri head in the air. Obviously, another major super weapon of the Mind Empire, Psychic Storm, was also put into the space at this time. The two super weapons were all released towards a base. It can be seen that the Soul Empire is indeed determined to destroy this coalition base. However, the Mind Empire's thoughts were guessed in advance this time, and the coalition base also made corresponding arrangements. After the gene mutation, only a small number of ground troops were sent to attack, which exposed the special situation. In the visible electronic map of the base, the Mind Empire was anxious, but had no choice. Not a single Apocalypse tank had been retrieved, so it could only focus on the few anti-aircraft crawlers. As the Psychic Storm ended, these anti-aircraft crawlers and several people around them, the SEALs, were also directly controlled by the Mind and changed their stance to be used by the Mind Empire. They either aimed at the gunships in the sky and fired at them, or ran towards the surrounding buildings in an attempt to blow them up. However, this base had already made arrangements. A group of armed helicopters ignored the controlled anti-aircraft crawlers and killed the 3 SEALs. Then they turned around and ran away. Suddenly, they broke out of the dark area. More than a dozen Rhino tanks quickly killed those anti-aircraft tracked vehicles under focused fire. Now, the troops controlled by the Psychic Storm have been easily killed, but the remaining group of wild orcs are still wreaking havoc. To deal with this group of wild orcs, the base's approach was very simple. They just sent out an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle, stopped some distance from the wild orc army, dropped 2 radiation engineers, and then turned around and ran away. After they ran away, 2 radiation engineers immediately deployed and inserted the radiation reactor directly into the ground. A large area of the ground was radiated dark green, covering all the wild orcs. Within a moment, it all turned into thick water. At this time, there is no need to worry about accidental damage. After all our own infantry have been mutated into wild orcs. The armored troops have either been evacuated or have been controlled and quickly eliminated. Even various buildings have been destroyed by the Psychic Storm, destroying large tracts. In this case, the radiation engineers can deploy as much as they can. No matter how large the radiation circle is, there will be no accidental damage. As all the wild orcs were killed, the 2 radiation engineers hurriedly stood up, and the contaminated land gradually returned to normal. At this point, the 2 super weapons of the Soul Empire have all been released. Although it has indeed caused heavy losses to the coalition base, fortunately, it was deployed in advance and no bones were injured in the battle, and a lot of combat effectiveness is still retained. However, the super weapons have been released, but the danger of this base is far from being eliminated, because the 4 Yuri bases in the coastal theater have already assembled heavy troops and are ready to go, taking advantage of the convenience of super weapons. Whether the coastal theater can be defended depends on the subsequent blocking battle. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 711. Super weapons are terrifying. If used properly, they can destroy an enemy base. Their huge destructive power and influence force all hostile camps to deal with them carefully. However, in super weapon mode, the attack of conventional troops cannot be ignored. For example, in this coastal war zone, the 2 super weapons of the Soul Empire were all dropped. Even with the advanced deployment, they did not impact the foundation of the coalition base. However, the impact of the follow-up troops in the 4 Yuri bases was still more dangerous than the super weapons. This is not something that can be dealt with by advanced deployment. The current defense strength of this Yuri base alone cannot withstand such a large number of Yuri troops. However, both the coalition forces and the allied forces had guessed this situation in advance. When the coalition base deployed super weapons, bases in several nearby war zones had already urgently sent troops to assist. Just because they were worried about the super weapon of the Mind Empire, these batches of reinforcements did not actually enter the coastal war zone. Instead, they hid outside the war zone and were on standby at any time. After the super weapon passed away, the 4 major Yuri bases mobilized troops. When the vanguard troops were still halfway, these reinforcements had already entered the coastal theater en masse. The fastest ones are the coalition armed helicopters. The coalition reinforcements come from coalition bases in 2 different directions. The 2 batches of armed helicopters add up to more than 30 helicopters, which is more than the number of local coalition bases. Following closely behind were the coalition forces, 2 batches of anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, more than 30 in total, each loaded with conscripts, magnetic infantry, and even some SEALs. Then there were more than a dozen terrorist robots. These terrorist robots had special functions and were not suitable for defense. So as soon as they entered the war zone, they turned directly and forcibly harassed Yuri's armored troops halfway. Among them, the ones who attacked at that time, 6 of them were blown up, but the remaining 4 got directly into various tanks and began to cause endless destruction. The coalition forces dispatched all faster troops, and the infantry directly entered the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles to facilitate their journey. As for the Allied forces, the speed was a bit slower. After all the Allied forces appeared, more than 10 Phantom tanks and more than 20 Grizzly tanks appeared one after another. This quantity is naturally far inferior to that of the coalition reinforcements, but after all, it is to assist the coalition. It is already a great honor for the Allied forces to dispatch this group of armored troops. If Wang Ling had not desperately assisted the Eastern Plains war zone, even I'm afraid none of these armored troops will show up. Several batches of reinforcements arrived in a hurry, quickly entered the coalition base, temporarily handed over to their commanders to command, and quickly deployed defenses with local troops. A large number of armed helicopters were deployed on the front line. Phantom tanks were arranged in front, followed closely by Apocalypse tanks, Rhino tanks, and Grizzly tanks. Dozens of anti-aircraft tracked vehicles were lined up in the rear, interspersed with hundreds of infantry of all types. Stacked together, like a thick steel city wall, guarding the entire base. To put it bluntly, this kind of defense was influenced by Wang Ling's video. The coalition commanders in various theaters basically learned Wang Ling's way of setting up defenses. However, due to the lack of Wang Ling's powerful firepower, this defensive effect is greatly reduced. However, there are currently too many troops participating in the defense, which is enough to make up for this shortcoming, and they can completely compete with Yuri's large army head-on. After the defense was completed, the vanguard of Yuri's troops, the group of laser UFOs, finally gradually flew in. Dozens of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles in the back opened fire and quickly shot them down. Subsequently, Yuri's ground troops gradually arrived, and the armed helicopters opened fire directly from a distance, officially engaging in firefights with Yuri's troops. In this battle, Yuri was determined to get rid of the base and completely occupy the coastal theater. However, the coalition base and several groups of reinforcements were also resisting desperately. Either you die or I live. The battle between the two sides was very fierce. From dark to dawn, artillery fire continued continuously. Soldiers were sacrificed almost every moment, and armored units exploded. It was not until the first rays of the early morning sun hit the earth that this tragic battle finally came to an end. After setting up a good position and receiving reinforcements, the coalition base finally succeeded in annihilating all invading enemy forces. However, its own losses were too huge, with almost half of the casualties. Even one of the leaders of the 2 field teams was killed by a virus sniper's gun. It was tragic and tragic. The remaining soldiers were exhausted after fighting for so long. The situation they are facing now is actually similar to that of the Eastern Plains. Several major Yuri bases have sent troops to attack overnight, and they have been engaged in battles. Even if they successfully defend, the cost will be frighteningly high. If Yuri's base continues to be attacked one after another, I'm afraid it will be difficult to save this base. However, Yuri's base is not feeling well either. With the successive attacks, the number of its own troops has also been sharply reduced. In a short time, it will be difficult to attack again like last night. As a result, the coastal war zone finally ushered in a brief period of stability. However, this kind of stability is very unbalanced. When the war will resume depends entirely on the state and mood of Yuri base. With the current state of the coalition base, it is difficult to hold onto it for too long. If we want to completely change the situation, we still need stronger reinforcements. As for this reinforcement, the coalition forces have actually already booked it. Who else can be there besides coalition base number 1? But now there is one last thing that Wang Ling has not finished yet, which is to destroy Yuri base number 3 and number 4 and completely pacify the Eastern Plains war zone. In order to speed up the offensive process, the coalition forces even set the location of the nuclear bomb attack in Yuri bases number 3 and number 4 to assist in the attack. In order to complete this task as quickly as possible, while the battle was still going on in the Binhai Theater and the countdown to the nuclear bomb attack was less than half a day, Wang Ling had personally led the elite troops of the Wolf Group and the Eagle Group to approach the two bases and temporarily station them down. A few hours after the battle in the coastal theater ended, the nuclear bomb attack was finally ready. After Wang Ling's final adjustments were completed, the headquarters finally set the coordinates and issued the ignition order. Buzz. The nuclear bomb attack was officially launched, and a continuous and rapid siren sounded on the electronic maps of both the enemy and ourselves in almost all theaters. In the nuclear bomb silo of the headquarters, the oversized nuclear warhead finally rose rapidly under the push of the rocket. Empty, disappearing into the electronic video. The war zones are far apart, and the distance between the headquarters and the Eastern Plains is also very far. However, the speed of the nuclear bomb attack is also ridiculously fast. It was only a few minutes after the launch. That huge nuclear bomb attack, the nuclear warhead has accurately landed between the two Yuri bases. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 712. Boom. Buzz. The nuclear bomb attack was launched, and the super-large nuclear warhead landed accurately between the two Yuri bases. At this moment, a huge explosion was triggered, and a huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky, as if it was about to break down the clouds. The earth shook, and the sky and the earth lost color. The dazzling light seemed to overwhelm the sun for a moment. The explosion at that moment rippled through the heavens and the earth, and was about to burst everyone's eardrums. Even if they are just watching it from the electronic video, they can obviously hear no sound, but everyone watching it seems to have become deaf at this moment, and they can only hear the buzzing sound that keeps echoing in their heads. Unlike the Allied superweapon Lightning Storm is extremely powerful, but the multiple lightnings also disperse its power, and it takes more than 10 seconds for dozens of lightnings to be released. However, the nuclear bomb attack was a super powerful explosion that was completed instantly. At the moment of the explosion, a super powerful shockwave spread across a wide range. Within the inner range of this shockwave, all infantry will die if touched. Even the armored troops will be severely damaged. The Getter tank will even explode directly. The buildings were also uncomfortable. The defensive buildings in the core area of the explosion were destroyed in an instant. All the biochemical reactors and even some other high-rise buildings in the inner area were also extensively damaged in an instant. In the Red Alert world, this nuclear bomb attack occurred for the first time in all war zones. The first nuclear warhead settled in Yuri bases number 3 and number 4. Unfortunately, these two bases have no experience in how to prevent coalition nuclear warheads. After this period of development and expansion, the base originally contained a large number of buildings, soldiers, and tanks. However, this also facilitates the bombing of nuclear warheads. Preliminary estimates indicate that in this super-powerful explosion, as many as 300 to 400 infantrymen died instantly, as many as 30 tanks exploded instantly, and more than 20 buildings of various types exploded instantly. This is still a direct loss. On the periphery of the nuclear bomb explosion, a large number of soldiers and armored troops were injured to varying degrees, and a wide range of buildings were damaged to varying degrees. Of course, this was only an instantaneous explosion power. It was a nuclear bomb attack after all. After the explosion, a large area of nuclear radiation was left in the two Yuri bases, which gradually disappeared after more than 10 minutes. During this radiation period, a large number of soldiers in the two Yuri bases died suddenly due to excessive exposure to nuclear radiation and turned into thick water. Even the armored troops were losing blood all the time, and a large number of tanks exploded. After all the damage caused by the nuclear bomb attack was over, the two Yuri bases that originally seemed mighty and powerful have become devastated. The number of guards in the two bases has dropped by about 40%, and a large number of various buildings have exploded. The direct loss exceeded 30%. Superweapon, nuclear bomb attack, so terrifying. Of course, if a nuclear bomb fell on this war zone in the real world, the destructive power would be more than that. Not to mention these two bases, the strong storm impact may spread to the entire war zone, destroying everything along the way, and not even a blade of grass will grow within dozens of kilometers. Nuclear radiation is difficult to dissipate for decades, turning the entire war zone into a barren land. However, this is a red alert world, and the power of the nuclear bomb attack has been greatly weakened. It is already very terrifying to be able to cause the current damage. Witnessing the explosion of the nuclear warhead in red alert world, Wang Ling's brain was buzzing, his whole body was trembling slightly, and there was a wave of panic in his heart. He is indeed very strong now, but compared to this kind of super weapon, he is not at the same level at all. Not only him, but all the officers and soldiers who saw the nuclear bomb explosion, whether they were coalition forces, allied forces, or even all officers and soldiers in other theaters, were filled with excitement and blood boiling all over their bodies. As for the Yuri base that was directly attacked, all the surviving officers and soldiers are now feeling cold. Looking at the devastated base, almost everyone feels a strong panic deep in their hearts. The super residual heat of the explosion, it was even burning them all the time. According to the established plan, attack. However, for these two Yuri bases, the most terrifying thing is probably not the nuclear bomb attack itself, but Wang Ling, who is watching eagerly outside after the explosion. After the nuclear radiation from the explosion disappeared, Wang Ling waved his hand and gave the order to attack. The elite soldiers of the Wolf Group and Eagle Group were originally shocked by the terrifying power of the nuclear bomb attack. They were stunned and couldn't extricate themselves for a long time. However, after Wang Ling gave this order, all the shocked officers and soldiers immediately came to their senses and began to attack according to the established lineup arrangement. After all, it is the Yuri base, which is extremely good at defense, and the two Yuri bases are united. Even if they are visited by nuclear bomb attacks, this attack cannot be careless. It is still based on the principle of 1 inch long and 1 inch strong, and the weapons are incompatible. Gradually storm. And the results of the attack can be imagined. With Wang Ling's strength, leading the elites of the two field groups to attack, it would be difficult to defend the two Yuri bases, let alone now. The large forces attacked forcefully, almost sweeping through and clearing holes. Few Yuri troops could withstand the long-range bombardment of armed helicopters. Even if they rushed in with huge casualties, they would still face Wang Ling's fire suppression. If they got closer, the outpouring of firepower from some and other types of arms was simply difficult to resist, and they could only watch helplessly as the wolf-like coalition troops wreaked havoc. Although the battle was fierce, it was actually a one-sided crushing battle. Wherever the coalition troops moved, they destroyed wherever they went. All soldiers and tanks tried their best to output while ensuring safety. In this battle, the accumulation of massive military experience once again created a large number of elite troops. Even the original elite troops were injected with basic enhancers by Wang Ling. The upper limit of the military level was increased. With the help of this battle, many people it has also broken through to the 5-star Special Forces level, and even Chen Tong's magnetic blast infantry has been successfully upgraded to 3-star elites, greatly increasing their combat power. Of course, the one who has gained the most is Wang Ling. He has been promoted to the 7-star Ace Elite Combat Soldier for some time. During this time, he has experienced too many battles and accumulated too much experience, but he is still far away from the 10-star Ace. The level is always just a hair away, and the production kick has never been able to surpass it. And relying on this battle and this kick, he finally successfully crossed over and broke through to the level of 10-star King soldiers. The elite combat soldiers of the 7-star Ace are already so powerful, let alone the 10-star Soldier King. This is extremely outrageous in the Red Alert world. The power, rate of fire, and range are all enhanced based on the original abnormality. The Getter tank had no buffer time at all under his shooting, and was almost certain to die upon contact. It was no better than the infantry. Even the Tornado tank has become a big squishy, and can't sustain shooting for 2 seconds even when it's full of health. Of course, what is even more excessive is the range. After strengthening, Wang Ling's eyes are like a pair of telescopes, able to see extremely far away. With this abnormal AK rifle, the range has been increased by 20 to 30% on the original basis. It's farther than an elite-level virus sniper. This change also means that the virus sniper that could have been a fatal threat to him now no longer poses any threat to him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 713. What does that mean? This means that when facing the impact of Yuri's troops, Wang Ling will become their absolute nightmare and will be invincible. To say this is naturally a bit exaggerated, but it is indeed true. After Wang Ling converted into an elite combat soldier, he became stronger all the way. Only the virus snipers of Yuri's army could accurately kill Wang Ling with their super long range, and Wang Ling also avoided the virus snipers specifically for this purpose. Even if you reach the 7-star Ace level, if you encounter a veteran or elite level virus sniper, you will have no choice but to run away without an armed helicopter following you. In the final analysis, the range was still insufficient, and the virus snipers took advantage of this to overwhelm them. But now, he has successfully advanced to the level of 10-star Soldier King, and has completely surpassed the virus sniper in terms of range, and can even compete with the light tank. Coupled with his super firepower, the virus sniper will kill as many as he comes. Completely devoid of any threat. Even with Yuri's unit's multi-unit joint attack, Wang Ling now only needs one person to shoot from a distance to wipe out the entire unit. One person can stop thousands of troops. This sentence is not an exaggeration for Wang Ling. No matter in the game or in this world, there are no perfect arms, but they are limited to a single type of arms, and Wang Ling is definitely an exception. Through the system, he can possess several types of practical and powerful arms, and all of them can be promoted to the 10-star Soldier King. He can switch to different arms according to different battle situations and make up for the shortcomings of various arms, making him closer and closer to perfection and invincibility. Of course, Wang Ling is not absolutely invincible. When the number of Yuri's troops exceeds a certain critical point, Wang Ling alone will be unable to save the day. Moreover, Wang Ling is not good at naval combat now. It is true that after he was transferred to the SEAL team, the original landlubber also learned to swim. However, the water is not as good as the ground after all. Wang Ling cannot withstand the enemy submarines in the water. In addition, in terms of air defense capabilities, Wang Ling is really good, but if the enemy air force is slightly larger, it will be difficult for him to deal with it. For example, if he sees a large number of laser UFOs, he will still have to run away. However, Wang Ling is not that stupid. This game is all about group attack. He cannot give up the advantage of group battle and put himself in danger. For example, now, after being promoted to the level of the 10-star Soldier King, Wang Ling adapted slightly and started experimenting with all the guard troops of the 2 Yuri bases. The powerful combat power suppressed the Yuri guards without the ability to fight back. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 infantrymen were killed. In one breath, swaths of infantrymen fell. A group of Getter tanks coming from a distance entered the shooting range, and then they exploded like firecrackers. Even the arrival of the tornado tanks was like entering a desperate zone. One exploded within 2 seconds, and rows of tornado tanks were inaccessible. The mind-controlled vehicles, which are regarded as big killers, have super high armor. 4 of them charged together, but after entering Wang Ling's range, they heard the sound of shooting that was almost like a Gatling gun. The 4 mind-controlled vehicles, I couldn't even touch the hair before everything exploded. Fear. Fear. Elite combat soldiers are originally heroic units of the coalition forces, representing the strongest firepower of the infantry. Now Wang Ling has been promoted to the level of King of Soldiers. This powerful combat power simply crushes everything. Seeing Wang Ling killing everyone, not to mention the fear of Yuri's guards, even the large coalition forces were a little frightened when they saw it. However, after being frightened, this group of attacking troops were as excited as if they had been given a shot of blood. The whole army was full of high morale. Maintaining this mentality, all coalition offensive forces attacked even more crazily. The Yuri base, which was already difficult to resist, quickly collapsed. 2 Yuri bases in succession collapsed under such a crazy attack. All Yuri guards, not even a single soldier was left, and they were all swept away by the excited coalition troops. At this point, Yuri bases number 3 and number 4 were completely destroyed. Oh! 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 Beautiful, another victory. Haha! Dot. Maintaining this excitement, this group of elite troops from the coalition shouted excitedly. This battle not only destroyed the 2 major Yuri bases, but even the Eastern Plains war zone was successfully pacified. The battle achievements were outstanding and of great significance. And this is already the 2nd war zone they have conquered with their own hands. As the main battle team, how can these people not be excited? Good guy, this pervert Wang Ling is even stronger. If I fight him, I don't even have the slightest confidence that I can win. To be honest, Agent Tanya had already guessed this result and didn't find it strange at all. However, even as an allied hero-level unit, she felt a little frightened by Wang Ling's powerful combat power after upgrading her level during the battle. On the side, a deputy was in disbelief. No, sir, Wang Ling is strong, but is he stronger than you? As the war goddess of the allied forces, Agent Tanya is an invincible and powerful existence in the hearts of this group of people. Now, can they not be surprised when they meet someone who even Agent Tanya feels inferior to? However, Agent Tanya just wrinkled her face and refused to answer this question. Now, the war in the Eastern Plains theater is over, but Wang Ling, as the hero, and the many attacking troops did not have much time to celebrate, and they did not even have much time to rest. After a brief celebration, they assembled their troops. The class teacher returned to the court. They are fine here, but the coastal theater is still dangerous and their support is urgently needed. The outcome of this battle was actually predicted by the coalition headquarters. Before the initial transfer from the Holy City war zone, the number 1 Allied forces base stayed in the Eastern Castle area for a few extra days in order to wait for the garrison, which inevitably felt like a delay in the fighter plane. This time, the experienced coalition headquarters dispatched garrison troops in advance and came in batches. When Wang Ling and the others returned from victory and just arrived at the base, the first batch of coalition garrison troops, 5 armed helicopters, had already arrived at the coalition base. Shortly afterwards, 10 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, loaded with various types of infantry, also arrived smoothly. Other tanks, and even temporary bases, were much slower and could not reach here within a short while. However, after all, there is no war in this area, and the current garrison is enough to replace the number 1 coalition base. In order to buy time, General Li Wiki was already ready to move. However, before the relocation order was issued, more than a dozen Allied helicopters flew to the Allied base from outside the map, and more than 50 Allied infantry jumped out of them. Then 2 more Allied transport planes dropped off more than 20 Allied soldiers. Immediately afterwards, 10 Chrono Legion soldiers also appeared at the Allied base in an instant, and more than 10 rocket-flying soldiers came in a hurry. Looking at this posture, it seems that the garrison has been dispatched in advance to replace Agent Tanya's Allied base. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 714. Hey, Tanya, are you going to move the battlefield so soon? Seeing the Allied defenders gathering, Wang Ling asked curiously. Agent Tanya snorted and replied, "Why, only you are allowed to move, not us." Wang Ling was speechless for a moment, and Agent Tanya continued, "I'm fed up with the commander's position. It's annoying to worry too much. I've already guessed the outcome of your attack this time, so I informed the headquarters in advance. Send out the garrison, and after your battle is over, I will rush to other battlefields as reinforcements, be a vanguard, and have a great battle. As for this commander, I don't want to do whoever he likes to do. Good guy, she's used to being free and easy, and even the heavy responsibility of commander can't restrain her anymore." Wang Ling was a little dumbfounded, but he didn't find it strange. In fact, he and Agent Tanya had the same idea. They had always refused to take up the position of commander. Wouldn't it be better to be a relaxed field team leader? Then which war zone do you plan to support? You still have to ask. Of course it's the coastal war zone. The situation in the coastal war zone is a bit urgent right now, and that's where I can play. Good guy, what a coincidence, we are also there. Hey, I didn't expect that we are quite destined. Since we are going to the same place, why don't we do it right away? What do you want to do? To be honest, these two people have similar temperaments. If they didn't have the hatred of the fifth instructor and the two sides were in two different forces, maybe the relationship would be closer. However, that is only if. In fact, even if Agent Tanya has intentions, Wang Ling is still resisting. Now it is just because of the alliance between the two armies that he has temporarily put aside those grudges. However, during this alliance, the two talked to each other, but there was no big gap. During the radio contact, they learned that both sides were going to the same war zone for support. Agent Tanya immediately had some ideas. This idea told Wang Ling, and Wang Ling did not refuse. Subsequently, General Li Wiki was notified of the plan, and General Li Wiki thought for a while and agreed to this approach. Then, it was time to move. In the coastal theater, the situation was a bit critical and there was not much time to lose. However, the base vehicle moved very slowly, so we could only send out powerful reinforcements in advance to assist in the battle. In the coalition base, this important task was naturally handed over to Wang Ling. He personally ordered hundreds of troops to be transported by anti-aircraft crawlers. He also brought more than 30 armed helicopters to form a vanguard army and quickly rushed to the coastal theater. Subsequently, more than 20 Rhino tanks and more than 10 Phantom tanks also drove out of the base as the second batch of reinforcements. The large troops followed behind the base vehicle, marching together and escorting them by the way. As for the buildings left in the war zone, they were not demolished this time and were handed over to the incoming garrison. As for the Allied forces, their approach was similar to that of the coalition forces. Agent Tanya personally led the team and selected more than 50 elite soldiers. They seized the helicopters used by the defenders to transport them, followed Wang Ling and left early. Battlefield, quickly rushed to the coastal theater. Here, we can see the advantages of the coalition and the Allied forces. 2 to 1, they can always free up sufficient power for emergency reinforcements. For example, the Eastern Plains war zone was about to fall, but Wang Ling rushed to the rescue. Instead of falling, it was completely pacified after several battles. Then there is the coastal war zone, which is faced with the two super weapons of the Seoul Empire taking turns to wreak havoc. The situation itself is urgent, but all parties urgently send reinforcements to forcibly help it withstand the next onslaught of Uri base. But now the situation is still not good. Wang Ling and Tanya, the heroic units of both sides, have led troops to quickly reinforce the situation. When these two people arrive, all crises will be out of the question. On the other hand, Uri base is 1 against 2. Although it has strong troops, it is difficult to rescue the war zones. At most, it can dispatch a large number of new soldiers from the barracks to join the battlefield to supplement its strength. Although the enemy forces faced in the Holy City War Zone and the Eastern Plains War Zone were too strong, on the one hand, they were defeated so quickly because they were unable to rescue them. However, there was nothing we could do about it. The battle for hegemony between the Alliance and the Allies was going well, but the Seoul Empire had to jump out and make nonsense, and even tried to control all mankind. It launched several sneak attacks, forcing the two hostile camps to stop. Not joining forces. No matter whether the two armies continue to fight in the future, in short, now, your spiritual empire has to be destroyed first. The last time Wang Ling rushed to the Eastern Plains war zone in an emergency, the two war zones were not far apart, but it took several hours of marching to arrive. But this time, the Eastern Plains war zone was really not close to the coastal war zone. Even at the speed of armed helicopters and anti-aircraft crawlers, it took nearly a full day to reach the coastal war zone. Naturally, Wang Ling and others would also rest at designated points during this period. Otherwise, they would have to eat, drink, and defecate all day long in an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and die in discomfort. On this day, the coastal theater was relatively calm. The 4 major Uri bases were all working hard to station troops and accumulate strength to launch another continuous onslaught. However, during the period of stationing troops, local harassment operations still occurred from time to time. When Wang Ling and Tanya agents arrived at the Binhai war zone, the coalition base was in the midst of a fierce battle. They were attacked this time by more than 50 infantrymen and more than 10 tanks and vehicles of various types. Although this coalition base is in poor condition, they have withstood the fierce attacks from the 4 major Uri bases. The current impact of this scale is naturally not a problem for them. Troops from all sides opened fire continuously. The strength of these Uri troops is quickly consumed, and there is no need for special reinforcements. After taking a look at the electronic map, Wang Ling was relieved. In this coastal theater, because the Allied bases were wiped out, the spy satellites were not retained. Today's electronic map also seems a bit obscure, with black unexplored areas everywhere. However, it seems that during previous battles, the bases of the two armies had launched a strong attack on the Uri base. The 4 Uri bases happened to be on the visible electronic map, and even most of the appearance of one base on the edge was exposed. Hey, Wang Ling, have you seen the Uri base in that city? What do you think of this base? At this time, Agent Tanya also asked over the radio. That city base was the Uri base that was mostly exposed on the electronic map. After Wang Ling heard this, he quickly checked it and said with a smile, "That's it, Let's fight quickly. It turned out that this was what Agent Tanya had originally told Wang Ling. Both of them are heroic units of the two armies. They rush to support a war zone together, and their self-confidence is inflated. Unwilling to be alone, something is about to happen as soon as they arrive.